Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. The Super Mario Bros. Movie opened this weekend to absolutely huge box office ticket sales. So much so that its domestic opening weekend box office of $146 million is the second highest for a digital animated film. This means that the Super Mario Bros. Movie beat nearly every single Disney and Pixar animated movie's domestic opening weekend box office. The only Disney Pixar movie whose opening weekend box office that the Super Mario Bros. Movie didn't beat was around $182.7 million in 2018, and that was for the film Incredibles 2. Disney and Pixar should be absolutely embarrassed by this, given that their most recent animated film, which was released last year, the disappointing Lightyear movie, only earned a pathetic $50.7 million domestically for its opening weekend. And that movie ultimately flopped, as I talked about in multiple videos that I had released last year. But unlike Lightyear, the Super Mario Bros. Movie isn't going to flop. In fact, it has already greatly surpassed its break-even point. The production budget for the Super Mario Bros. Movie was $100 million, which means that its break-even point was around 2.5 times that, or $250 million. Over the extended Easter weekend, the Super Mario Bros. Movie has earned a grand total of $204.6 million domestically and $173 million internationally for a global gross opening weekend of $377.6 million. That's 3.7 times its production budget. So the Super Mario Bros. Movie is already making profit for Universal Pictures, which is fantastic because any money that the film continues to earn will be even more profit. What's ironic with the Super Mario Bros. Movie is that professional film critics were brutal on the film, giving it only a 55% average tomato meter score on Rotten Tomatoes, making the film rotten. But that's not the case with audiences who are giving the film massively positive reviews. So this film perfectly illustrates just how out of touch professional film critics can be with the average movie-going public. But what about the film that opened last weekend? Well, that would be Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. And as I said in a video that I released last week, even though the movie was #1 at the box office for its opening weekend, it was a very weak opening weekend because the movie only grossed around $70.1 million globally. And I said in the video that I had released last week that the movie would need to not lose more than 18.6% globally from week to week in order to have a chance of breaking even. Well, domestically, Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves only earned around another $14.5 million this weekend, which was a drop of 61% from the opening weekend to the second weekend. Internationally, the movie did a lot better because it earned another $28.9 million, which was only a 12.2% drop since last week. Thus, when combining the movie's current earnings of $62.3 million domestically and $61.8 million internationally, Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves has earned around $124.1 million to date. So that was a drop of 23% globally from the film's first weekend to its second weekend, which means, unfortunately, that Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves is still more than likely going to flop because that 23%, while that doesn't sound bad, is still too large of a drop, which I will demonstrate. If we project a consistent 23% weekly drop in global ticket sales for future weeks, then the most that the movie could make would be just over $300 million. But because Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves has a $150 million production budget, when multiplied by 2.5, that works out to an estimated $375 million break-even point to account for the 50% that movie theaters keep for themselves of ticket sales, as well as the additional cost of advertising the movie. Also, more realistically, that 23% drop probably won't persist from week to week. If I allow that percentage to incrementally increase to 40% by the 10th week, then the projected final gross box office ticket sales tops out to around $257 million, which I think is a more likely final global gross ticket sales for the film. So what the numbers are essentially saying is that had the studio only spent $100 million to produce Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves instead of $150 million, then the film would have had a much better chance of actually breaking even. The studio was clearly overly optimistic and very unrealistic by positioning the film to open only a week before the Super Mario Bros. Movie, because a lot more people have played that game or are at least familiar with Super Mario Bros. Than there are people who have played or are familiar with Dungeons & Dragons. Thus, too much money spent combined with a lack of public interest has relegated Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves to be one of 2023's flops, while Universal Pictures enjoys the profits from the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to see more of our videos in the future and help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.